Hello and welcome to Global News Today here on Al Arabiya English with me, your host, Michal Prendergast. And coming up in today's show, I speak with Mark Epstein, the brother of disgraced paedophile billionaire Jeffrey Epstein, as questions around the case continue to surface long after Jeffrey's death in a Manhattan jail in 2019. Also, Pakistan's IT Minister Shehzad Fatima Khawaja, she joins us to talk AI, youth innovation and tech ties with the Gulf. A story that's gripped headlines, sparked endless conspiracy theories online, and even transcended politics. Jeffrey Epstein, who died by suicide in a Manhattan jail in 2019, according to the Department of Justice, is a story that won't just go away. Well, joining me now is his brother Mark Epstein to discuss this saga further. Thanks for your time, Mark. You're speaking to us from an undisclosed location for security concerns. Are you afraid for your life?
No, I'm not afraid for my life, but I equate it to, when you cross the street, you're not afraid to cross the street, but you look both ways because you're cautious. So I'm not afraid, but I am being cautious.
You're Jeffrey Epstein's only living relative. When did you hear of your brother's death first?
Well, I heard it the morning that he was found dead. I was having breakfast at a hotel and the television was on. And Jeffrey's picture came on, and they said that he was found dead from the apparent suicide. That's how I learned about it, mid-breakfast. The government didn't notify me as they said they did. I learned about it on CNN.
And you say apparent. You don't believe it was a suicide?
No, I don't. Well, at the time I did. When they first said he was found dead from an apparent suicide, I had no reason to doubt it. He was in jail. He was facing a potential long prison term. I knew he wouldn't want to do that. He didn't have any children to worry about. Our parents were already gone. He didn't have to worry about me. So there was no reason to doubt it. But then the next day, they did the autopsy. I had to go back to New York. I identified his body and they did the autopsy. The autopsy was done by Dr. Roman, the city pathologist. And I had Dr. Bodden there because I had the right to have my own pathologist witness the autopsy. And they came out of the room, and I was expecting them to say that this was a suicide. But they came out of the autopsy saying that they couldn't call this a suicide because it looked too much like a homicide. And that's when things started to change pretty fast.
What do you think happened to your brother?
Well, I think he was killed in the cell. Exactly. Why? And also what had happened, they immediately, or within days, they labeled it a suicide because by doing that, it stops any other investigation. Now, this has never been investigated as a potential homicide. And that's where they made the mistake, because it's obvious that they didn't do that. And Bill Barr, the Attorney General at the time, made a statement. He said that he personally watched the videotape and he saw that nobody went in or out of the tier where Jeffrey's cell was, and that convinced him it was a suicide. Well, when I first heard that, I said this is a cover-up for two reasons. Number one, there were about a dozen other prisoners on the same tier as Jeffrey that would not have to go and go into or out of the tier in order, if they were going to kill somebody. So by completely eliminating the possibility he was killed by somebody already on the tier shows that he wasn't being straight. And also to think that somebody can get to that door, go in, kill somebody and leave completely undetected doesn't make a lot of sense either. So that's when I knew it was a cover-up. And by calling it a suicide, they don't investigate as a homicide.
There's been a lot of talk at the moment about the metadata of the video. It shows that the video has been cut for over 2 minutes. There's also the insinuation that the prison officers were asleep. Do you believe this?
Well, I know that people have investigated the videotape, and it's not the raw footage, and it has been edited. I mean, the people who do that kind of work, have said that it clearly is not raw footage, and that it's been also pieced together from more than one feed. And there's a lot of things in the video that doesn't make any sense. There's that person or something in the orange blur. They're trying to say it was somebody carrying linens up, but other people have testified or said in the prisons, people don't carry things like that in prison. because you never want your hands tied up. So if they're moving linens around, it's in a cart or some kind of wheeled bin or something. So it looks more like somebody in an orange outfit, not somebody just carrying orange linens. Also, at the beginning of the video, they talk about Jeffrey like being walked into his cell. First of all, you can't tell if that's Jeffrey or not. You can't make out who that person is. And you don't just walk into Jeffrey's cell. To get into Jeffrey's cell, you have to go up the flight of stairs through a locked, barred door, and then his cell was on the right-hand side. So you can't just casually walk somebody into one of those cells. Also, they try to make it sound like the doors that were being shown in the video were the doors to his tier or his cell. They're not. That's not it at all. And they've shown that you can get to the cell door out of the camera range. So I don't know what footage Bill Barr was referring to, but after seeing that people could get to that tier undetected, and knowing that there were other prisoners that could have, killed somebody, maybe Bill Barr wants to reevaluate his conclusion and come to a different conclusion, because he's looking pretty foolish now, sticking to that story.
And if it wasn't suicide, who do you believe killed your brother?
Well, I don't speculate. I stick to facts. But if this was a true homicide investigation, those are the questions that they would look for. Who did it? And you'd have to look at who would have the ability to orchestrate a murder like that in a federal prison, who would have the ability to orchestrate the cover-up that the government's obviously doing on here. When they did the initial autopsy, both of the pathologists, the city pathologist and Dr. Biden, said it was more likely a homicide than a suicide. That doesn't appear in any of the reports. Nobody talks about that. They just gloss over it and try to claim it was a suicide, negating what these two highly qualified professionals said. Even Kash Patel, the new head of the FBI, he said, it's suicide when you see it. I thought that was pretty stupid because, number one, he didn't see Jeffrey's body. He wasn't there. And the question becomes, like, how many suicides has he actually seen that makes him such an expert on when you see a suicide? I couldn't believe he said that.
Do you think your brother had a lot of powerful enemies? He had information on people. Do you think this led to his life being taken, as you stated?
That's a reasonable theory, yes.
Tell us about the relationship between your brother and President Trump.
Well, they were very friendly. Everybody who was around knew that they were very friendly. Jeffrey used to speak about times he spent with Trump. Trump was in Jeffrey's office quite a number of times, and people who worked in the office could testify to that. I don't know why he said he was never there, because that's a very provable lie. They were good friends. They used to travel on each other's planes. They used to spend time together. There's lots of photographs, a number of photographs of Jeffrey at Mar-a-Lago for different events and Trump's wedding. For him to deny that they were good friends is also, just a big lie.
And it was the same with President Clinton. What was it about your brother that allowed him to have so many powerful friends?
No, I don't know. Jeffrey and I didn't socialize together. We didn't see each other very much, although we were always in communication via telephone and emails. Jeffrey was a personable guy. He traveled in those circles, and you meet a lot of people in the work he did. I don't find that unusual, because once you are in that circle, that's where all those people are. So you just meet a lot of them.
There's a huge amount of pressure on President Trump to release the files, as it were. What's your take on that?
Well, they're obviously hiding something. Because, look, if this was clearly a suicide and there was nothing damaging, why not just release everything? Why all this cover-up? It just doesn't make any sense.
Did you speak to your brother while he was in prison?
No, I didn't. No, the last conversation I had with Jeff was the night before he was arrested. He was in Paris. He flew home the next day, and he was arrested in July. So it was Thursday night. He called me from Paris. But just a normal talk, what's new kind of call. We used to keep each other abreast of what was going on. Nothing out of the ordinary on that phone call. And then the next day he flew home and he was arrested. And that was the last conversation Jeff and I had.
Were you close with your brother?
Yeah, we were close, but we didn't get together. because he had his life and his circles, I had mine. We have homes in different cities. So we weren't always in the same city together. That's number one. And even in New York City, where we would both be at times, he lives uptown. I spend my time downtown. So there wasn't any reason necessary for us to get together, but we were always in communication. So we were close that way.
Ghislaine Maxwell, who is serving a 20-year sentence in jail at the moment for being an associate of your brother, should she be afraid of her life, in your opinion?
I'm not really the one to be the expert to give you an answer on that. I mean, she should also be cautious, I would say, because, people are dying. But it also depends what course of action she takes. I don't know what she has said or what she's going to say. So, she should bear in mind that, yes, people have been killed already.
There's also been a lot of speculation that your brother was somehow associated with Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency. What do you think of that speculation?
Well, it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's just speculation. I have no knowledge of that, so I can neither confirm nor deny. I'm not the right person to ask that. I don't know about that.
When did Jeffrey first tell you about his crimes, and did he ever admit?
Yes, in 2006, I believe, when he first was getting into trouble, he asked me to come talk to him. So I went to see him, and he told me then that he was getting into trouble because he was with girls that were too young. He admitted he was stupid, and that he was with girls that were too young, and he was getting into trouble for that, and he wanted me to hear it from him. So he told me. So this way I didn't hear it just on the news or something. So that was when I first found out in 2006.
And how difficult was that for you to hear as his brother?
Well, I wasn't happy about it, but like I've said before, I believe in consequences and ramifications for your action. He was stupid, as he said. He got into trouble, so he was going to have to, pay the price, whatever that was going to be. I didn't mean for it to take his life, but he would have to fight the charges, because he admitted that he was wrong. I wasn't happy to hear it, but, again, our parents were gone, so they didn't have to go through that. So, I just accepted it.
And how has this affected your life? You share the same name in terms of jobs, in terms of friends, in terms of events. How has this affected your life?
Well, first of all, I've been retired a long time already, so I don't have to worry about a job situation. There's a lot of Epsteins around, so it's not like that much of an issue. I mean, at the early part, I did have a number of death threats for myself and against my children. I was dealing with the FBI and the New York City Police Department, dealing with that. That has kind of calmed down. And I've just been trying to focus a lot of time on coming to the realization or dealing with the realization that Jeffrey did not commit suicide. And, if he didn't commit suicide, and like everyone who looks at all the information, nobody thinks he committed suicide. Well, then the next step is to figure out, well, who killed him? Why was he killed? That's what an investigator looking at a homicide, those are the questions they would ask. Who would have the ability to pull something like this off in a federal prison? And who'd be afraid to have Jeffrey still alive? And who did it? Who actually, pulled the trigger, so to speak? Who sanctioned this? So that's what the next round of investigation should look at. And people are starting to ask these questions. I was dealing with a group just recently of independent investigative people, nothing to do with me. They weren't working for me. And they were using AI to help try to nail this down. And they put in all the information they had and all the anomalies that took place where the camera's not working and the guard sleeping and the broken bones in Jeffrey's neck that don't match a suicidal hanging. And the AI came up with the probability that it was 75% chance that it was a homicide and only 25% chance it was a suicide. It couldn't be more accurate because we didn't have photographs or we don't know exactly how Jeffrey was found the morning that they found him dead. There's a description that came out a couple of years ago in the Justice Department report, but some of the things from the autopsy don't really match that description. So, and also the broken bones in Jeffrey's neck, the 3 breaks, the hyoid bone and the 2 cartilages from the thyroid cartilage, less than 2% of suicidal hangings end up with those 3 breaks like that, less than 2%. So again, makes it much more likely it was a homicide.
And in terms of the investigation,
those kind of breaks from a homicide, from a strangulation.
and in terms of the investigation, you believe it should be reopened as a murder case?
Yeah, absolutely. But then the question becomes, who's going to investigate it? Since the Department of Justice is already covering this up, could you get them to do an honest, clean investigation? That's questionable, which is a real shame if Americans can't trust the Justice Department to do an honest investigation. That's a real sad state of affairs.
And speaking of your brother, he died a very wealthy man. There's a lot of talk about his trust. Obviously, it still has hundreds of millions of dollars in it. Are you a benefactor of that?
No, Jeffrey and I were not in each other's wills traditionally. I didn't need his money. He didn't need mine. I'm not an executor of his estate, so I have nothing to do with his estate. In the will that was published, it said that I'm his sole heir. He states that I'm his sole heir. And if there was no will, I would inherit his entire estate, being his sole heir. But it says that in the will, which means there is a will, which means I do not inherit his entire estate. All of his assets went into a trust, and the trust dictates what's supposed to be done with his money. I'm not a trustee. I have no idea what the trust says. So, I have nothing to do with his estate.
And speaking of Donald Trump, as we were earlier, President Clinton was also on his plane over 20 times. What's your opinion on the association between President Clinton and your brother?
Okay, one of the things about the flights, just to be clear, Jeffrey took Clinton and some other people to Africa years ago. There was some AIDS trip. They were stopping in many places. So they're counting each leg of that trip as a separate flight. So if they made, I don't know how many they did, but on that one trip to Africa, if they stopped in 10 different locations, they're counting that as 10 flights for Clinton. So it's a little bit misleading. I know Jeffrey was close with Clinton. Jeffrey always admired Clinton. He liked being around with him. And Jeffrey flew many people on his planes. So I don't see anything telling about that.
And Jeffrey had some very unusual art in his house. He had a famous photograph, or a painting as it were, of Bill Clinton in a dress.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I don't think I've seen it. Like I said, I wasn't in Jeffrey's house for many years. So he had a lot of art. He had all kinds of things there. An interesting collection.
We're just running out of time. So just lastly, are you hopeful that you're going to get justice for Jeffrey?
I'm hopeful, yes. Whether it happens or not, who knows? It may be difficult while this administration is in power, but maybe one day. Look, we still don't know all the facts about JFK or Martin Luther King, so this may be another one of those mysteries that go down in history. But people should be aware that he did not commit suicide. It certainly doesn't look like he committed suicide. It most certainly looks like he was murdered.
Mark Epstein, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity.